This episode may contain sensitive topics. Discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Lusty Lounge. One of our hosts will be with you in a moment.
Thank you, Desiree, for the intro. Today, I'm your host, Puce. With me, as always, is Noodle.
That's me. Hi.
And Tsuna.
Hello.
And today, we decided to have a smart person join us in the lounge, because we're 3 brain cells in pod.
Speak for yourself.
Guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Maven Tree Cat. I am a writer and beginning artist, but I was getting my start in academia as an anthropologist.
Alright, so first question. When you say getting your start, do you mean you already have the master's PhD, or you're starting to get the master's PhD?
Oh, no, I've long had the master's. I've basically been doing academic work on the side. It's just an independent study for the past, I think it's been 9 years now since I got the master's degree. I was initially doing it in the hopes of garnering formal employment in research fields, whether it be museums or in academia itself. But the field has turned a little bit out of favor in the United States, so...
Yeah, let's go with that. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not very typical for us to have, a genuine, actual smart person, so... Had to ask. Alright, Puce.
Maven, aside from, I don't know what anthropology has to do with our not safe work stuff, but would you like to explain how the heck I found you, or shall I explain?
Well, you'd made a post about specifically Vorday 88, and I had responded noting that I am relatively well entrenched in that community and could probably explain things from a more both emic and edic angle, as they say in anthropology. And you said that you were more interested in the anthropology side of things, the subcultural studies side of things, than necessarily getting my opinion on Vorday, since you already found someone for that.
You already have shown you have really big brain cells, because I don't know what you just said.
So, to explain, anthropology is the study of people in the most broadest sense. There are a bunch of different subfields. My subfield is particularly cultural anthropology with a splash of linguistic anthropology. In other words, I study human social creations, basically how we navigate the world as cultural groups and as humans in general. Subcultural studies is the study of in-cultural groups that are groups of difference, of deviance, ones that are not necessarily just behaving according to the overarching customs of their culture, but have created their own in-community. Generally speaking, that does include kink subculture, it includes furry subculture, it includes goth, metal, punk, any group where you can basically pick someone out of a crowd if they're wearing the right symbols and icons and be like, that person's part of X group, that's probably a subculture. As for emic and edic, those are terms that referring to how you're understanding particular types of content. Emic is how you're attempting to understand meaning and creation culture from the perspective of those who hold those beliefs. Edic is a more attempted, not necessarily objective point of view, but an external point of view. How you view those cultural constructions as an outsider. So if I were to start talking about K-pop, for instance, I personally do not have any emic understanding of K-pop because I'm both not in the K-pop scene and also don't have anyone that predominantly identifies with it that I can directly ask. However, if you ask about furry subculture, or vor subculture, or BDSM subculture, or goth subculture, or metal subculture, all of these I have emic perspectives on in addition to edic perspectives. I have both either personally had identification with these groups, or I know someone and have gotten their direct reporting and understanding their perspective on the matters.
Thank you. That helps me understand it better. I don't know about the other two.
Used to have a bachelor's degree.
That's less than a master's, so I don't know how big that makes your brain.
A lot bigger than yours.
Fair. I just know that was a lot of info for my brain, so just making sure we're all hanging on. So, Maven, how you said you lured me in by saying you studied kink subculture, and so I was curious, how did you go about deciding to research that and then researching it in general?
I was relatively undecided in undergrad for the first year and a half of my undergrad. I was bouncing between things like psychology, marine biology, biochemistry, a lot of different fields. I eventually got a class on cultural anthropology, and it was like love. It not only resonated really strongly with my ethics, with my ethos, but also it spoke to a personal level of wanting to understand difference, which I find to be particularly meaningful. After having that class, I decided to do a major in anthropology, and one of the first electives I could get into was a class on taboo. Now, generally, the class on taboo was reaching for the more cross-cultural taboos, understanding why they're taboos. Generally speaking, they fall into pretty same broad categories across all cultures. In studying that, I brought into discussion the idea of more strange paraphilia, more strange sexual interests, subversions of the taboo. And the resulting discussion from that really made me interested in taking a more academic look at these things. I was lightly interested and included in these fields before from a personal angle, but studying them was sort of my way of rationalizing, working out what I personally wanted to get out of these places, as well as extending that understanding in a way where I could discuss it with, say, a normie, and have them possibly walk away saying, I think I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, kind of like what we do. Okay. I respect that. Also, it takes like a lot for a person to go, how do I want to say this? So normally when we ask people how they got into what they got, it's, oh, I watched something or this, that, and the, it's something along the lines of I was exposed to X media. And you're just like, nah, I wanted to study it. I respect that. Because not everyone thinks like that.
In some degrees, yes. In some degrees, no. I mean, as I said, I did have some touch into kink communities relatively early on because of personal interest. I've always been a sort of person who, when confronted with something they don't understand about themselves, I want to know more from every possible perspective. So anything that I'm passionate about, I want to get what I later learned was both the emic and edic understanding, the inside and the external understanding.
I get that. That's kind of why I like enjoying having guests on about all this junk.
Do you?
Kind of.
Okay. All right.
Hey, my brain cells put together a similar sentence with much dumber words.
All right, ask your next question.
I actually have a question. Is there a common taboo that you've seen within communities that you enjoy the most? Like, whether it be BDSM or furries?
I wouldn't call kinks themselves taboos. Some kinks are subversions of taboos.
What I mean is, like, within those communities, have you seen something that is common within, like, the taboo portion of it? Not the whole thing as a form of it being taboo, but more of just, is there a common one that you've seen that people tend to move towards more than others?
Kink scenes are impressively diverse. It is very difficult to point to just one of the common taboo categories and say this is the one. There are ones that are more passable to others. For instance, there is a taboo on general sexual intercourse. Sexual body parts, sexual engagement, sexual, interactions. These are taboos that are somewhat cross-cultural. Obviously, kink scenes often deal pretty strongly with sex, or at least sexual adjacent topics. On the flip side, you probably will find a lot more vehement reactions to the taboo of death and discussing death and things related to death, but there are scenes for that as well. There are some sections of the vor community that deal with fatal vor. There is snuff scenes in the stronger BDSM scenes. There are concepts of breaking the taboo of death in breathplay and peril. There is a considerable amount of other things like that. You can kind of find a community that breaks any taboo. Another one is bodily fluids. It's usually related to toilet functions, but that also, saliva, arousal. These are all things that generally fall under the taboo umbrella. There's blood as well. I can't believe I forgot blood. There are scenes also based around all of those. All of these. So if there is a taboo, the subversion of it likely will result in a kink of some kind.
Interesting. Okay, I was just curious because I'm in more of the harder kink scenes. So I'm always curious I'm always curious when it comes to the broadness of what we're all into, or is there a subdivision of softer notes in a harder scene is what I like knowing.
So you're asking whether there's some sort of common cultural association across all kink scenes?
Yes. Just something that they all kind of share in a way that's not, I wouldn't say common.
Practically, the answer is no. But that is because there will always be bad actors, groups that have misconstrued broader cultural concepts, etc. If you're saying ideally, then the answer is yes, because ideally, every single subculture of kink has to have a prerequisite, the understanding of oneself. If you're not able to self-analyze at all, you will not necessarily know which taboos you are interested in subverting, what aspects of the broader overall culture you're deviating from. Kink communities, like all subcultural communities, are communities of difference. So the general binding rule is that everyone kind of understands they are different in a way. And that's not a bad thing. That's just a fact. That's why we have subcultural communities.
Interesting. Thank you. I was just wondering. My brain worked weird.
Yeah.
No, I understood it. I think I followed the line of thought they would have had just there.
I can't even say that sex is a common binding thread here, because I myself and many of my friends are actually just straight up asexual. I have one person I know very closely that is intensely familiar with kink subcultures, especially the vor subculture, and is actively repulsed by all things sexual. So there really is no binding taboo or subversion. The only commonality is that there is a subversion.
Fascinating.
All right, then. Side question. Do you think that you being asexual makes doing your research easier?
No, it doesn't.
I feel like that's a loaded question.
So, one of the beautiful things about asexuality is that it is kind of a manifold identity. Being asexual does not necessarily mean you're sex repulsed. You can be a sex-positive asexual. You can have little to no libido. You can have an out-of-control libido. The only real definition on asexuality is that you don't have an attraction to people for sexual interaction. And that's kind of true for me. I don't understand how somebody can look at someone and just immediately start thinking of sex. It's like, you have to cue me into that thought before I even start daring to imagine you in any scenario or perspective. The way I put it, in more playful terms, is I get squirmy. Rather than saying aroused, which has sexual connotations, I get squirmy. So, yeah, if I'm studying something and it's hitting me, it doesn't make it any easier just because I'm asexual, because I still got libido.
Okay.
You're just not sure where it's supposed to go? Or where it should go?
It's more that my libido is funneled primarily as a private, personal thing, or as an appreciation of contexts rather than of specific people.
Fascinating. Because, unfortunately, I'm one of the people, if I find somebody attractive, I can already picture them, like, in a way in my head.
Yeah, I see. I just genuinely...
instant.
I just genuinely don't have that, and I don't even understand it from a, like, empathic way. I just have to take people's word on it.
Understandable. I'm just a pervert, and once I find somebody attractive, it's just that's perverted thoughts will come to my head first before, like, anything mundane, truly. Which is very unfortunate, but it just happens.
Alright, pews were safe.
I think I get what you're saying, though, Maven. Because I feel that when I see somebody, like, my brain is like, oh, this thing clicks with them. I just want to sit down and discuss this thing forever, and, like, any sexual thoughts don't seem to enter my mind as easily.
If someone cues me in that they are into a specific thing that I am also into, and they make it clear that they are willing to engage with this with me in a fantastical level, then I will start having thoughts about them in that specific context, but it never navigates out of it. If somebody in the vor scene starts talking about vor, I can start picturing them as possibly a predator or prey, but I could not picture them as being, like, trussed up and bound in leather or something.
That sounds almost borderline demi.
A little bit. I was thinking demisexual.
Yeah, there's a potential that I have some sort of, demisexual thing, but I have a lot of different barriers to get to that point. It's far easier for me personally to say asexuality, because that gives people more of an insight into correctly reading me than saying demisexual.
I kind of get that. I feel like if you say demisexual, they're like, I still have a chance. You just have to, like me. And I'm like, yes, but no? Mostly no?
Never thought like that.
That's what my friend is, so.
Understandable.
I just use her as an example.
I suppose some people see it as a challenge, then.
There's also this expectation that if you're friends with someone, you now necessarily have those thoughts about them now that you have that relationship. But for me, demisexuality would be more like they have to very clearly set up boundaries before I even start thinking.
Very consentful.
That's fair.
Did you have to bring this concept of studying kink subculture to your professors? Or was this something you could do freely without their input?
I'm a very cautious person. I always checked my paper topics with people. That being said, I'm sure there were times where you could just straight up get away with it. Where you just choose the topic and they couldn't say anything about it. It also just depends on who your teachers are and what sort of institution you are in. Nowadays, there are going to be fewer and fewer institutions which truly embrace the academic and open-hearted and ethical understanding of a field, where they will start censoring you for random research topics that they find to be illicit. That's just because of the current climate we're in. But I always checked my topics anyway. I just happened to choose my teachers relatively well. Also, to my advantage is I never explicitly made a study, except for in that taboo class, because that was the topic of the class. I never made the topic of study entirely about and clearly objectived towards understanding or representing kink cultures in a particular light. I would usually frame my subcultural studies in a different way. I'd say I would like to do a study on social network density by using this in-group I have on Tumblr. Or I would like to do a study on cross-subcultural symbology by using the goth and BDSM scenes. So I always had an academic angle when it came to my actual active studies in academia that made it substantially more palatable to start discussing these topics. And I won't be as ambitious to say that they would have refused or said yes either way if I hadn't had those angles. That's just how I was trained to think, is to always find the underlying concept in a particular study. So I didn't actually run into any obstacles, but I was already being exceptionally cautious, and I only got more cautious as time went on because I saw what was happening around me.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I feel like walking up to your professor and saying, "Oh, I want to figure out why people like the idea of consuming each other," might not be the best idea. So having an overarching thought of the community is probably the better idea.
In anthropology, there's a legitimate awkwardness with self-representation. The platonic ideal of anthropology is this researcher who is completely an outsider coming in and experiencing a field as a temporary suspension of disbelief insider, basically being a guest in the culture, so that when they withdraw, they can then have this objective personality perspective. That is a somewhat antiquated belief. In the 90s and 2000s, the predominant belief was postmodernist. In other words, much more accepting of blurred lines. Even still, usually you would not call a book written about, say, a Mexican mission by a Mexican missionary to be an ethnography, to be an anthropological study. So there's this very weird blurred area. So I wouldn't want to go up to a teacher and say, I'd like to study how, people find people eating each other to be an arousing fantasy, because then I necessarily, ethically, have to start talking about how I'm already an insider on that one, pun intended. So it's difficult to pull that off. It's a lot easier to pull a study off when you are somewhat of an outsider or an uncertain sort of periphery element. As an example, in my thesis, although I was doing a thesis on protest and social media structure, I had a large chunk of my introduction describing my interactions with the brony subculture, because that was the avenue of which I actually initially kind of got into the specific place I was at in order to study this particular facet of protest subculture. It was necessary context. So there's a requirement of kind of self-analysis and self-reflection of, how involved am I? How connected am I? Where are the blurred lines? So yeah, I wouldn't want to approach someone to talk about vor because I kind of already know. It'd be disingenuous to just sort of pretend like I didn't.
That's totally fair. So when approaching studying this and approaching studying kink subculture in general, how did you go about it? And, like, what steps did you have to take to, like, start looking into and doing your research in general?
Generally asking people involved in the scene, though there are sometimes circumstances where asking people outside of it is proper procedure, but generally it's just about forming connections initially. I have never been, for instance, to a BDSM club. However, I'm reasonably confident that I have a significantly well-versed understanding of BDSM clubs because I've spoken with countless people who have been to them. Both, veterans back of the, more early clubs of the, 80s, 90s, and also more modern, newer members who were either taking up leadership positions in their particular sub-communities or just getting their start. So by getting so many different perspectives, I can piece together a pretty complete picture from a lot of different angles about what that scene is like just by listening to people. And honestly, that's like the bulk of anthropology, of cultural anthropology, is just listening to people and taking them at their word. You don't take them at their word in the sense of you believe they have the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You take them at their word saying that you genuinely have to go into believing that these people are representing their truthful perspective on things. First step is making connections, being able to know who to ask, what to ask, the sort of customs, what are the taboo topics of this particular sub-community, what are the particular courtesies, the particular ways of labeling yourself as a safe individual, what shouldn't you ask, what should you ask, things, just very basic functions like that. And from there, I can potentially start either participating, observing, or sort of just allowing someone else to speak for their community. What you all do on this show is not that far removed from anthropology at all. There is a significant amount of overlap.
Yeah, I can see that. The more you talk about it, the more I'm like, oh, we're kind of like the, like, hyper, what do they call it? I can't think of the right words.
I like how that we both can't think of words today. I think
because I'm trying to think of. I got it. Because there's, like, pop psychology and pop sociology. I feel like we're the, like, pop anthropology version of real anthropology. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would have just said that we're the goofy side of it because we just talk about people and their kinks and how they feel about them and the way they have come across the community. I just like that we're kind of like the goofy side of it, though.
That sounds like the better way to put it, because I feel like when you talk about pop psychology and sociology, people use all these, like, big terms that they don't know.
Yeah, technical terms.
We're just being goofy and, like, talking to people about their turn-ons and junk.
Yeah, we're just being silly with it. We're more casual with it, I would say. I feel like with actual anthropology, it's more clinical and it has a set base of specific questions that are targeted towards the topic at hand.
I'll be straight up honest. The terms are immaterial. Academia does a big performance, this sort of ivory tower perspective of where you have to make these fields have all of these different barriers to entry in order to ensure that only the faithful gain access to the core of your field. It's ridiculous. There's a lot more anthropology and ethnography out there nowadays that talks in just completely plain language, with any term they use being actively defined in the text. This is because postmodern anthropology and post-postmodern anthropology, don't get me started, I will ramble about that. These fields of anthropology really believe that anthropology should be a field accessible to the common person, because the whole message of anthropology is we'd like you to understand your common person, your common, your relative in this world of people. We'd like you to understand the structures of power that are constraining or enabling them. We want to give you context. So, not using fancy terminology should not discredit you from being, investigators in your own field.
Oh yeah, I totally understand that. I more meant it in the because there's there's pop culture and it kind of just osmosis is into regular everyday life of people, and then there's people who are like, oh, I know this thing because I've heard the word used a lot, so therefore I'm an expert. That kind of thing, if that makes sense. That kind of pop psych and soc stuff kind of gets on my nerves when people act like they know a lot without having ever done any research.
Yeah. It doesn't help that a good chunk of that pop sociology, pop psychology is just straight up bullshitting. There's no evidence. There's no evidence for any of their claims. Quite frankly, the name I took for myself, Maven, is from a pop psychology book. I got it by reading The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. The book was presented in our college, in our undergrad, as this deeply insightful and meaningful investigation into how social networks work. It's complete baloney. There's not a single piece of definitive evidence. It's all anecdotal.
I was going to say, I feel like I remember vaguely hearing about it collapsing and that book being approved very quickly.
I got to read an excerpt of that when I was in high school for my psychology class.
Yeah.
You got to take psychology in high school?
Yeah,
You didn't have psychology as an option?
I took psychology.
In high school, no.
I had psychology too as well.
Yeah, same here.
I had to go to a special program just to get a psychology course for high school. So, yeah, I know both sides of that. It made this whole big deal about how there's 3 different people. There's the faces, the mavens, and the connectors. I believed it at first because a bunch of authority figures were telling me that it was to be believed. I only later realized how much you have to really investigate on your own. But I did really appreciate the idea of being a maven, which is the idea of being this collector of information who then finds people to put the information in the hands of so that it can be used to best effectiveness.
Oh, I love ReZero.
No, why did you say that? I hate you.
Because I just finished season 2 and I'm like, oh, you just want to be echidna. I got it. I get you. I understand. Well, echidna without all the murder, but,
I don't have context. I don't have context on that one, so I'll take your word on it.
Anime.
Yeah, no, I knew it was an anime. I have not watched or read about that one.
Recommend if you can handle body horror.
So, moving on. Do you wish more people studied anthropology and understood anthropology?
God, yes. It is the world today is being predominantly defined and worked by people that have fundamentally surrendered their sense of empathy and connection to other people. Anthropology is about establishing that. In fact, I would go so far as to say anthropology assumes that that is a core part of the human experience. It's just that anthropology believes that it's particularly hard to see systems of power at work. That, those in more powerless positions have a harder time having their voices heard, and those in powerful positions are often disguising how much they have been aided by those systems of power. If we had more people that truly understood anthropology as its modern context, as its modern understanding of anthropology at least, I genuinely think we would not be in the current political situation we are in. And it is bad. What with the recent purges of adult content creators, what with the recent puritanical revolution in financial sectors, what with these demonization of marginalized groups, of trans people, of immigrants, and also this fundamental media war on historical awareness that disguises gross injustices inflicted upon vulnerable people. It's incredibly upsetting to me on a daily basis, so much so that I genuinely have kind of cut out a vast majority of social media from my experience, and mass media as well, purely because I just can't stand looking at it anymore. I really wish people could understand anthropology and have access to these materials. But there's a reason why some of the first attacks from anyone seeking to entrench themselves in power is going to be on marginalized groups, education, and education-adjacent institutions, museums, communities, nonprofits, etc. They don't want people to understand. They don't want people to know things. Because knowledge is power. And knowledge about power is resistance.
I agree. I feel like I can't really add to what you've said
There's something I want to add, but I can't remember the name of the book, and it's my favorite book.
You two got an open invitation to talk about politics, and you didn't take it. Yeah, that's wild.
Well, I know you're not crazy about bringing politics into this too heavily, so trying to...
Well, when it's literally too entranced in the topic, can't really avoid it, so...
Thinking about 1984. Think about George Orwell. With the way he would...
What do you mean? He wrote the best guide to how to lead a nation ever.
I love that book. And there's another one. The book burning one with the firefighters.
Fahrenheit 451.
Thank you! That's my favorite book. I couldn't remember the name of it.
You can tell how eager they are to not have that used against them by how eager they are to use it against other people falsely.
That does lead into a side question I want to ask. Do you think that, say we did go down the route of more people studying anthropology and understanding anthropology as a whole, do you think that kind of like people have used psychology and sociology in recent past, that anthropology could be used for a lack of better term, evil's sake?
I hate to break it to you, but anthropology was founded on evil. The very reason that the field of anthropology began in the first place was as a kind of ad hoc justification for slavery. It was an attempt to argue that there was a distinct progression of culture, this holier-than-thou order of a hierarchy of culture that naturally followed human evolution, that these industrial Western European communities, these cultures, were truly the peak of humanity, and all of these African tribes are just tribal associations. They're barely human. You know, phrenology, the study of like the skull sizes and shapes and trying to like read and determine intelligence and ethnicity and gender and stuff from those.
Yeah, that whole like Caucasoid and all that mumbo jumbo.
That's founded in early anthropology. That was early anthropology. The whole cabinet of curiosity that predated museums was founded as a way of basically displaying particularly ill-gotten assortments of justification for your own power. That's why modernist and postmodernist movements were so important to anthropology. Because if it wasn't for those movements, anthropology would be an irredeemable field. Because it was founded so much in racist colonial narratives. It was unthinkably corrupted of a field from its very conception. Modernism said, hold on, slow down. we're not really understanding these people by doing this. And so modernist anthropology started bringing in the idea of emic and edic, this sort of idea of taking people at their word, trying to understand how they view themselves, and realizing in the process of doing so that these people are happy. They have lives and cultures that they love. They're not missing anything. They're not lowerly evolved just because they didn't develop themselves into a capitalistic industrial society. They have meaningful connections with history and with the world around them that mean the world to them. And when postmodernists began, that's when we started breaking down the boundaries of what defines race. That's why how we got to the point of having people kind of pointing out that race is an invented concept. There is no such thing as the white race. There's no such thing as, black as a unified race. There's no such thing as these lines. We create the lines. That's what postmodernism is. It's a critique saying that all of these dividing lines between one thing and another are human inventions. We're only divided because we say we are. These two movements basically rescued anthropology from being a tool of the oppressor to being a voice of protest, to being a critique of power. So yes, it absolutely can and has been used for evil. And it could be used for evil again, if people forget the lessons that the sort of evolution of the field has presented. That's why I said I could ramble about postmodernism, because that's technically my field, but it's also... God, that gets into some ivory tower bullshit.
That's fine. It's what you're here for. It's just weird seeing the peanut gallery get quiet.
Well, I just get too entranced in people.
I'm just listening
going
this
deep into what they think.
Yeah, because this is not something I've gotten to hear of. My brain has to take in all of this information. It's the tism, my guy.
What do you mean? Wait, what do you? You are a marginalized. You're a marginalized group. What are you talking about?
Shut up. I like listeting to
Noodle.
Maven.
We are the marginalized people here.
I'm a little more marginalized than you, but still.
Well, yeah, because there's less of you.
It's not a competition.
I'm a Native American.
Between
and a woman,
these two, it seems like it.
With me and him, it is.
She just needs to feel special.
Yes.
Nah, that's one of the lessons of postmodernist feminism is we really shouldn't be competing on who's more oppressed, because when one of us isn't oppressed, we're all oppressed.
I can only think...
While you are correct, she wants to be the most oppressed. And I'm like, you know what? Fine, sure.
It's...
Fucking woman.
It's not even that.
Because of having done the research and knowing how subcultures interact and behave amongst themselves, do you find yourself, having done the research and been in that mindset, do you find yourself thinking about that stuff on a day-to-day basis now? And kind of catching yourself studying quote-unquote groups?
I don't really catch myself doing it because that's just part of how I work now. There is some degree of autism, ADHD in the mix with my anxiety and depression. I come from a significantly long line of experiences where I was pushed to be the outsider by everyone around me. So as a kid, I was trying to analyze, figure out what people were doing differently from me, how I could be one of them. And the answer was, I couldn't. No matter what of the harmless stuff I did, they wanted me to do the harmful stuff. So I said no. And that got me pushed to being an outsider once more, no matter what I tried. Didn't matter if I was playing in the band at football games, or if I was marching in the parade, or if I was, playing with the theater kids. no matter what group I went with, I was the outsider. So I always was studying. I'm like, how do I do this? How do I be included? How can I be me and still be liked? I didn't have a true friend group until 5 years ago. And the only reason that I ended up getting that friend group was because I found people that had the same values that I did, and that had the patience and to understand where I was coming from. They did the anthropology to me and let me in. So when I'm doing all this studying, it's not like it's turning me into some sort of cold, calculated monster. When I'm doing all this studying and analysis and stuff, it's always tinged by a human emotion, a human want to reach out and say, I see you. I'm going to be the one to give you a chance now. I'm going to be the one to extend my hand in understanding. So I don't think that's a bad thing, that I have this sort of running analytical process going in the back of my brain for everything that I look at. It only made me more of an ethical person. It made me more sensitive. It didn't make me colder. It made me warmer.
Ah, man, is it raining in anyone else's house or like just mine?
Somebody's cutting onions, that's for sure.
Damn, that's crazy. They should stop. Like, I'm not that hungry.
Unity through knowledge is like such a beautiful thing. It's so nice that you have that fire in you. It's so like refreshing.
I don't often get to talk about this stuff to a receptive audience, so it's always very heartwarming to get a chance, because maybe one person will kind of realize either that they're on the outside and now how to look in, or that they're on the inside and need to look how to understand and reach out. Now that's what anthropology is to me. That's what subculture is to me. It's about creating little pockets where people can be themselves and find community and homes and safety to explore. And maybe someday they'll step out of the subculture and start trying to change the culture as a whole and just say, no, this is wrong. We can do things a different way. But for now, it's about protecting us for when that time comes.
So, moving slightly on from anthropology into you writing stories and stuff like that, do you use any of the things you learned through your research in the writing you do today?
Sometimes it's difficult to say, because the lessons you learn through anthropology, through any of these subcultures, could be the very same lessons that someone else learns through life experience or through just reading a lot, being entrenched in literature and the human experience in general. What I can say is that I'm very clearly allergic to very specific things that I disagree with. For instance, in the furry community, there is a running discussion about, which species is the best? Which species do you like for this the most? Which species do you like for this the most? And I'm over here sitting like, doesn't matter what species you are, it matters how you own it, how you use it, how you embody it. I can't tell you which one's better because you're all awesome in your own ways. Why would I bother? So I don't tend to do very species play oriented things. I also don't tend to make my stories with evil that is purely evil. In a superhero series I do, the villains, I'm very strategically positioning them to humanize them as much as possible. Because in one way, it's a kind of a faith in the human experience that there can be very legitimate reasons in evil actions. But also part of it is this unwillingness to bring that irredeemable evil that we see in the world sometimes into these places of escapism. So it's like really, really hard to say what is just me being ethical or human and what is me being this, lofty academic anthropologist. In the end, I just write what I want to see and kind of carry the messages that I want to have.
When people ask about what you studied while you were in school and getting your master's, did you bring up the fact that what cultures and subcultures you were specifically researching?
That entirely depends on who I'm speaking to.
I get it.
My parents are relatively understanding and open-minded, very supportive. They know the full extent of all of my studies. They've read all of my papers. I don't tend to hide basically anything from them. The only thing I kind of keep separate from them is my online presence. And that's more for their safety and comfort, since they're not completely knowledgeable about the things that I study. They just kind of know that I'm an ethical person and trust in me. And so it's mostly kind of out of consideration for them and out of safety for connecting real world information with, online persona. But if I'm talking with a stranger, I'm going to say I studied social network structures, which is perfectly true. That is, in fact, my primary field of study. It's why when Twitter started, self-destructing, and people were like, oh man, look at Blue Sky. I'm like, that doesn't solve any of the problems. The problems are structural. It's just copying the same structure by the same people. You're going to run into the same issues. And sure enough, Blue Sky is starting to suffer the same issues. So it's also why I was such a huge fan of Tumblr before Tumblr started getting puritanical.
I miss porn Tumblr so much. I miss so much of that porn. I think what hurts them even more is knowing that some of those people on there, they didn't have any other form of social media. It was just Tumblr.
But also, it's also why, I was a big proponent for Mastodon, because that did solve a number of the structural issues, and the ones it didn't, it started solving on a cultural level. There's always the complaint of it's too complicated, there aren't enough people on there. There would be enough people if you just joined. Regardless. No, I just say I studied social network structure, and that's perfectly honest. And I can explain, how the form of a social network defines how interaction works, how networks build. If I'm approached by somebody who's more open-minded, I'll talk about brownies. That's kind of a good middle ground, a good testing subject. Because that is gender and, to some degree, cultural nonconformity that kind of allows them to sort of navigate a safer topic, one that's toothless, and I can kind of gauge their reaction on that. If they're super open to that, then maybe I'll start talking about, my studies of BDSM, consent culture, and aftercare, or my studies on photographic, sort of the eye of the camera lens and how that shapes social networks, or any number of other smaller topics that I've researched in this process. But, it entirely depends on who I'm talking to, because this is an age where I'm already kind of on the out and out being trans. So, the less targets I can paint on my back, the better.
So since you don't use social medias and other adjacent things, what do you do for fun? What are your baseline hobbies?
I do a lot of writing and art. That's basically my primary form of employment at the moment, is through commission work and support on Ko-fi. I've thought about doing like more academic essays. Like my late boyfriend was briefly doing his like FA journals and such, but the audience for those wasn't ready then, and they're only less ready now. But so I spent a lot of my work on that. Sometimes I play games. I had a huge binge on Hades 2 so now, once it came out, in 1.0 full release.
You're so lucky. I want to play it so bad.
I do watch some stuff. Right now I'm going through Spy X Family with my current boyfriend. I'm looking forward to the My Hero Academia and One Punch Man. And
I love Spy X Family.
My main passion is tabletop RPGs. Right now I'm in Pathfinder 1E and 2E games. I'm in Ironclaw games. I run a Fate Accelerated game. I love different systems of tabletop RPGs, the stories you can tell, the characters you can be, the worlds you can explore. There's nothing that pleases my autistic brain as much as having both full creative exploration and interactions and social connections while also playing with a bunch of numbers and dice that represent them in very intricate ways.
Math rocks, yeah. No, I get it. I got some math rocks.
I play too much D&D, so I completely understand. So, Maven, while doing your research, did you find anything particularly interesting, even though you are kind of on the inside of the group?
I think my favorite understanding was understanding of... I predominantly deal in fantasy. I have very little interest in engaging in many of the more in-person communities. Learning about BDSM culture was perhaps one of my favorite parts. It was so eye-opening. Because in BDSM, you're dealing with some very sensitive topics in very real ways, including like non-consent play and, reliving of certain traumas, and also, sometimes even going as far as parallel electrostim, whatever. The concept of prior discussion, safe words, red, yellow, green light, keywords, hand signals, safety tunes, and most importantly, aftercare and discussion and reflection on scenes. That was genuinely exciting for me to learn about. Not because I have any interest in necessarily engaging with it myself, but because that principle of open communication and discussion and response and care, the sort of being able to engage with a pure fantasy and know that the second you say something, everything stops and there's a genuinely caring person on the other side of that. How healing that can be is genuinely exciting for me. I apply those principles in a lot of the discussion I do, just talking about stuff, much less things like roleplay or the stories I write or the art I draw or anything like that. BDSM, consent, care, and communication culture, it really shows the level of attention to empathy and acceptance and cooperation that the community has grown out of many years and generations of experience. So whenever somebody starts talking about, like, BDSM things and, like, really dark, like, ooh, they're so awful light, I'm like, no, I have proof and listed experience and literature that says they're more responsible than most straight married couples. We could all learn from that.
100% agree with you there. And I'm gonna switch up question 10 a little bit, because now I'm more fascinated with anthropology than I am the kink culture part of this conversation. Is there any advice when somebody's starting to look into anthropology and trying to understand the studies and the research that people have done that you'd like to give people?
Was the initial question about if people who advice for people getting into kink culture stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer both questions then.
Now I'm kind of flipping it on its head and asking about anthropology.
I'll answer both questions then.
Getting itched.
With regards to anthropology, if you are not actively in academia, the best way to start is look for best-selling ethnographies. Like, don't look for, like, New York Times bestseller or, like, Amazon bestseller. Look for what other anthropologists tend to recommend for common readers. There are a number of very accessible ethnographies out there that will broaden your mind to a number of very contentious topics. You will think more about what, say, Mexican immigrants come through if you read about, the ethnography that I read about the environmental destruction and drug cartel abandonment of, certain districts in Mexico. You will think more of, the southern Alabama, trailer park owner when you start reading about, the sort of historical disenfranchisement that they've gone through. You will think more about Palestine, Ukraine, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan. There's so many different places that just getting a situated ethnography and understanding a story from their perspective, from that Emek understanding, that will open your mind and will start you to sort of understand the world from an anthropological lens. But more than that, just listen to people. Before you have a snap judgment, stop. See if they're willing to sit down and talk with you. Ask their story. Maybe you'll learn something, maybe you won't, but at the very least, you'll have done a better thing. You'll give them an opportunity to share what they weren't able to say. Now, I would note, it's a dangerous time, so I wouldn't say, do that to some random person on the street necessarily. This is an idealistic recommendation. Maybe start with your friends. Maybe start with someone you're a manager for, like an employee, or maybe even start with your manager. Regardless of wherever you start, just know that whenever someone gives you a whole cloth generalization about a group, and it's usually to their detriment, there's probably something deeper. Don't just believe that, all Aboriginal peoples are drunkards. Don't just believe that all white Southerners are racist. It doesn't matter what the generalization is. If you hear a generalization, try to see what the stories are from those people direct. Don't necessarily have to believe them whole cloth. There are people who will lie, especially those who are lying because they are benefiting from the current in power system. But the more out of power they are, the more they're probably not getting their words through. As for kink culture, again, this is a contentious time. There are a lot of people who are now using the disenfranchisement of kink and adult content as writ permission to invade these spaces and become abusers. There is a degree of protection in being a subculture, in being defensive and keeping out, bad actors and bad faith arguers and all this stuff. Love and tolerance as a subcultural message does not extend to the intolerant, but because of how fragmented things are becoming, you're going to find it difficult to just take someone at their word that they are a good actor. I would suggest starting slow, starting as an observer, finding an online community of a specific type, listening, looking, being patient. If you start seeing a voice that's calling for open communication, understanding, if you start seeing a voice that's genuinely trying to call out actual bad actors and is not doing ad hominem exaggerations, calling people pedophiles with no proof, or with flimsy fantasy-based connections, or, just these disruptive, problematic contentions and dramas. Look for the peacemakers. Look for the people begging understanding, and yet also standing firm against those that are resisting those calls. They're the ones you're going to want to learn from. I'll be honest, they are harder to find nowadays, but if you're patient, and please do be patient, especially if you're underage, getting involved when you were underage, bad idea. You are not only endangering yourself, you are endangering others. Be patient. Observe, don't act, and then find the people you think you can trust. And trust slow, but trust openly. And if you find those sort of people to help you get your bearings, that's when you can start being a little braver, going out there, getting involved.
All very good answers. Very thoughtful answers. Well, Maven, it's been wonderful. Now we are going to move on to what's called Last Call. You've listened to a couple of our episodes, so hopefully you know what it is. But for those who are first-time listeners, Last Call is where we each share our final thoughts, questions, feelings, concerns.
So, like, I had a girlfriend who studied this for, I think, a semester, and then went, nah, it's ain't for me, and then studied words or some shit, I don't remember. I've never really thought to put the human aspect into it, to add more, you said the word earlier, I don't remember what the word is. Why is the word eluding me? Empathy, yeah, to have more empathy. Because I'd never really thought about it as cold and calculating. It's just we study people. I never thought that would make a person more empathetic because people kind of suck. So, learned something new today. Woo.
Well, if you study something enough, one of two things happens, and it depends upon the amount of joy you derive from what you're studying. You either become desensitized, or you fall in love with what you're studying. I definitely recommend the latter, whatever you study.
Yeah, 'cause I definitely became desensitized to a lot of shit I learned in college, and I don't recommend.
Maven, last call for you.
I don't know, I'm just kind of grateful that I get a chance to talk about this again. I truly did follow the instructions of study what you love. Now, the mythos I was given as a kid was that, and you will find employment. Obviously, that's not true.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is not true.
Yeah.
But also, I don't regret it. I don't regret it in the slightest, even if it led my work path to being in a weird way. Because I ended up finding people I truly love to be around and to be a part of, and that empowered me to find myself. And so there was a point where I really thought that I'd never get to use this stuff again in a way that talking about them. But I have gotten to talk about it a little bit with the community that follows me closely. Getting to talk about it here is just really nice, and I hope people kind of understand where I'm coming from.
Well, it's definitely nice getting to hear you talk about it all. Definitely gave me all the little brain tingles I like to enjoy. Noodle, have you figured out what you were trying to say?
When you seek comfort, do you go to your favorite communities or communities where you have the most ties to with people? Or do you go to seek knowledge first and comfort? What do you do to make yourself feel better? I just can't fucking phrase shit today. I apologize.
People. It's definitely people. As I said, you either become desensitized or fall in love. I genuinely love people being passionate. I genuinely love people embracing the totality of themselves. I love people being empathetic. So, if I need comfort, I will go to the place where I have the most people I trust to be passionate, empathetic people that are living their best selves. And they bring me comfort. I get most of my writing and art done now on stream because I have people cheering me on. I helped get that wide community of people through some dark times by hosting bereavement counseling, essentially, on my own server for the passing of my late boyfriend. I have most of my tabletop RPGs groups now have stemmed from these communities because I can trust these people to be communicative, empathetic, excitable, passionate, artistic, creative, and uniquely them. So the answer is all of the above, except for the knowledge thing. Knowledge is an incredible tool and it's exciting to have, but in the end, it just goes back to that reason I took the name Maven. I didn't take the name Maven because I idealized the collection of knowledge in of itself. I idealized the name Maven because I was passionate about being someone who has the information for when the time comes that someone needs it. I wanted that usefulness factor, that connection. So knowledge to me is a means to aid empathy. But these groups, these communities, these connections I have now, they're what mean the world to me.
I like that.
It's very pretty. It's such a nice way of words.
Gotta learn something when you do. God, how many years was it? 8 years of
You
college?
know what? That's fair.
But that is the end of our episode. Maven, where can the peoples find you?
Well, due to the whole issue of Blue Sky, I'm not exactly going to be propping that right now. I guess if you want the best sites to find me and all of my stuff, the main one would be for Affinity. I'm on there, Maven Treecat, all one username, no spaces, no underscores, whatever. That contains all my writing, all of my art. Fair warning, there is a lot of Vor content. Otherwise, I also have a Ko-fi. It's also Maven Treecat, no spaces, no underscores, just all one thing. I do tend to keep that pretty much safe for work, just to make sure that there's no problems with it. But if you want to support me, I do take monthly support, and that gives you access to my Discord, where I will be happy to talk about any of these topics, and frequently do. Otherwise, I'm still learning how to do art myself, but writing is my main thing, so hopefully I can get to writing some more stuff soon.
Hell yeah.
Alright. So, thank you for coming on, Maven. Everybody say bye so Desiree can get this lounge closed up.
Bye-bye.
Bye!
Bye.
Thanks, guys. If you like what you heard, search Lusty Lounge on any podcast platform. If you think we did a good job at hosting, you can always buy us a drink on our Ko-fi. And if you want more of the lounge, subscribe to the Patreon for uncut and bonus episodes. As always, don't let the door hit you on your way out. It's very heavy. Until next time. Bye bye.